What he got in exchange was that President Trump ordered federal prosecutors to drop charges that were pending against MS-13 people who were in United States custody, had been charged with crimes. They were in U.S. custody. They were awaiting trial in the United States. And instead of having them stand trial and have information come out at that trial about the collusion between MS-13 and President Bukele, President Trump sent them back to El Salvador. Isn't that right?
Welcome back to Right View Nation, the unapologetically American voice you've been waiting for. If you're tired of the lies, the cover-ups, and the sellouts in D.C., then hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop your fiery opinions in the comments section below. And don't forget to share this with every proud patriot you know. We're exposing the truth, no matter who it offends. Ladies and gentlemen, what we just heard should send shockwaves through every single American who believes in law and order, justice, and the integrity of our national security.
Thank you, Senator, and thank both of you for your testimony on how we can better crack down on transnational gang violence. Some of us have been at this issue for a very long time. About 20 years ago, I formed a regional anti-gang task force with Congressman Frank Wolf from Virginia at the time to crack down on Central American gangs, primarily MS-13. But it does make it more difficult for us to crack down on gangs like MS-13 when leaders in their home countries are actually working against us. And that includes President Bukele in El Salvador. In 2020, the Salvadorian news outlet El Faro reported that Bukele's officials secured deals with MS-13 to reduce homicides, but in exchange for prison privileges and political support. Dr. Felbob, is it true that in December 2021, the U.S. Department of Treasury validated this report by imposing global Magnitsky sanctions on two senior Bukele officials for their roles in making these deals?
I saw the indictment, yes.
Right. And beyond that, and additional evidence came to light. In 2023, there was a DOJ indictment that revealed that Bukele's government helped an MS-13 gang leader known as Crook avoid extradition to the United States. Bukele officials even set him up in a luxury apartment and assisted in his escape out of El Salvador. Do you remember those reports?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And would you agree, Doctor, that blocking extraditions to the United States and aiding fugitives makes President Bukele often an unreliable partner when it comes to fighting transnational crime?
Certainly, if negotiations with criminal groups lead to political advantages, if they enable corruption, if they operate outside of the rule of law, and if they prevent disclosure of significant compromising evidence, this is very concerning as to what kind of partner such an individual, in this case President of El Salvador, could be in combating organized crime groups.
Well, I want to pick up on what you just said about preventing the disclosure of very important information to hold criminals accountable. Because when President Trump came to office his second time around, he made a deal with President Bukele, where President Bukele agreed to imprison in CICOT, a notorious prison, people who were taken from the United States in violation of their due process rights. Less attention has been paid to what President Bukele got in exchange. What he got in exchange was that President Trump ordered federal prosecutors to drop charges that were pending against MS-13 people who were in United States custody, had been charged with crimes. They were in U.S. custody. They were awaiting trial in the United States. And instead of having them stand trial and have information come out at that trial about the collusion between MS-13 and President Bukele, President Trump sent them back to El Salvador. Isn't that right?
Yes, my understanding from reporting by New York Times and other outlets is that this is indeed what has been part of the deal. And certainly the lack of disclosure that the charged individuals would provide in cooperating with U.S. law enforcement authorities or in U.S. courts is, in my view, significant blow to countering organized crime groups and, crucially, to countering the political collusion that enables it in a fundamental way.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think it sends a very dangerous message to U.S. law enforcement that when they're in the middle of making a case against MS-13 gang members here in the United States, rather than take them to trial and get that testimony and evidence, they get sent back to El Salvador, where they're effectively silenced. That testimony doesn't come to light. We've seen El Faro, one of the newspapers in El Salvador that has brought these things to light, being heavily persecuted by Bukele's government, all sorts of harassment. We just, within the last few weeks, saw Cristosal, which is a very important human rights organization in El Salvador, leave El Salvador because of their fear of retaliation by Bukele for their anti-corruption reporting. If you could just close where you began, really, which is saying that when you have this corruption, it does undermine our efforts to combat gang violence and puts more Americans at risk.
Absolutely. Anti-organized crime activities are fundamental to the health and well-being of society, but they need to take place within the rule of law. All too often, anti-crime campaigns become mechanisms of political repression that targets any kind of opponents. And for anti-crime efforts to be effective, they need to be strictly consistent with human rights, laws, civil rights, and they need to foster civil society openness, investigative journalism, and oversight by groups such as NGOs.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Thanks, Senator.
Let's get something straight. MS-13 is not some street gang tagging walls and stealing bikes. These are brutal, violent transnational criminals who have raped, tortured, and murdered innocent people across our nation. Yet somehow their operations are being shielded, not just by their home governments, but allegedly, at times, by ours. Yeah, I said it, and I won't back down. For years, we've been led to believe that our government, regardless of who's in power, is actively fighting gang violence. But today we're seeing clear evidence that foreign leaders like President Bukele of El Salvador have cut dirty backroom deals with MS-13. We're talking about officials handing out prison perks and political support in exchange for reduced homicide rates. That's not leadership. That's collusion with terrorists. And here's the kicker. Our own government knew. Not only did they know, but the U.S. Treasury slapped sanctions on 2 of Bukele's top officials. Why? Because they were directly involved in making these disgusting, under-the-table deals with gangsters. But it doesn't stop there. A 2023 DOJ indictment shows that Bukele's regime didn't just make deals, they actively helped a top MS-13 leader evade extradition to the United States. They gave this thug a luxury apartment and helped him escape the country. This isn't speculation. This is documented, detailed, and damning. And to top it all off, the liberal media barely whispers a word. Now listen closely, because this is where it gets infuriating. During Trump's second term, there were reports, serious ones, that gang members in U.S. custody, charged with crimes on our soil, were suddenly sent back to El Salvador. These weren't border jumpers. These were criminals awaiting trial. They could have exposed high-level collusion between MS-13 and the Salvadoran government. But instead of taking them to court, gathering testimony, uncovering the truth, they got a one-way ticket out. Why? Because the minute they testify here, the whole corrupt alliance comes crashing down. The swamp doesn't want that. And let's talk about the real heroes here. Independent journalists and human rights groups who tried to blow the whistle. What happened to them? They got silenced, harassed, forced out. El Faro, the paper that exposed so much of this corruption, is under constant threat. Cristosal, a human rights group, had to flee the country. This is what happens when gangsters run governments. This is the kind of foreign partner we're being told to trust? This is who we're cutting deals with? Let me make something absolutely clear. America first means putting American safety, American sovereignty, and American justice above everything else. I don't care what deal was made, or who made it. If it ends with violent criminals walking free and truth-tellers running for their lives, it's not a deal. It's a betrayal. And let me ask you this. How can U.S. law enforcement do their job when the federal government sends their cases packing before they reach the courtroom? That's not justice. That's sabotage. Folks, we are being governed by cowards and opportunists, and the only thing that keeps them in power is our silence. So today, I'm asking you, don't be silent. Be bold. Be loud. Be Right View Nation. If this fired you up like it did me, then do your duty as a patriot. Like this video, subscribe for more unapologetic truth, and comment below with your thoughts on this outrageous gang collusion. And make sure you share this with your friends and family, because the mainstream media sure as hell won't. Until next time, keep your head high, your eyes open, and your heart beating for freedom. God bless America, and God bless you.